Yes, we analyze all the metrics, synthesize all the data, and crunch all the numbers. But in the end, we're always getting 2 Power 5 football schools in the title game. Unless it's Notre Dame.
Hi everyone, this is Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. I want to do a shout out. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. I did. I'm stuffed, obviously, with turkey, cranberry sauce, and mashed potatoes. And of course, over the next, let's say, 72 hours, I get to eat all the leftovers. And I think actually that I enjoy eating the leftovers more than I do the actual Thanksgiving Day feast. I just love to have, on Thanksgiving, I usually have a really filling plate of just the vegetables. And I kind of save the turkey. And then what I do is I have turkey sandwiches. I feel like Ralphie's father on Christmas Story. Turkey hash, turkey soup, turkey this, turkey that. But I do enjoy the leftovers with Thanksgiving. It's we rarely have turkey, but when I do get it, I really enjoy the turkey sandwiches with a cold glass of milk, and love the mashed potatoes with the gravy. Love cranberry sauce, all kinds of cranberry sauce. I love. And green bean, the whole thing. It's just a great festive holiday, a great American tradition. And with that tradition comes with all that. You're stuffed with football from Sunday night all the way to the next Sunday night, because this weekend, as I said in our last episode, you're going to be filled with just football. So if you are just enjoying your time in the man cave, you can watch pro and college, and even high school. I saw a couple of high school football games played. Plus, you have college basketball, NBA, NHL, and of course, college football. As my cartoon stated, we're getting ready for the conference championships, the last couple of games for the regular season with traditional matchups like Michigan and Ohio State, Alabama, Auburn. And of course, Notre Dame makes its annual trek out to the West Coast to either play Stanford or USC. This year they're playing Stanford over the Thanksgiving Day holiday, so that should be enjoyable for them as well, as they make maybe a final push to get to a New Year's Day bowl, and they should defeat the Stanford Cardinal. Of course, though, me making predictions, I'm just terrible at that. That's why I always say there's no such thing as an expert, quote unquote. I know a lot maybe about particular things in sports, but I'm no expert. And that's why I love the show, because I get to do my research. With that being, I wanted to focus a little bit about this. Michigan and Ohio State, obviously, there may be 2 teams that come from the college football players from the Big Ten. I don't know if that's going to transpire. Probably the winner of the Michigan-Ohio State obviously will have really the big edge. But then, of course, I don't know whether there will be an upset by the Western Division winner, and I think it's Iowa, playing either Michigan or Ohio State, and to vault over that. So let's just say Michigan wins tomorrow or beats Ohio State and then defeats Iowa. They're in. They're one of the 4 members. And, of course, obviously you can take the SEC. Florida State might be a little bit different. They might drop a peg with the unfortunate injury to their quarterback last week. And Washington probably making its final pitch. Obviously, they still got to get through the Pac-12 and all the rest of it, but it's going to come down to Washington, Oregon. This may be the first time. Well, this may be. You might have 4 different conferences represented in that Final Four. For the last few years, it's been, let's say, 2 SEC teams or 2 Big Ten teams, whatever. But you might just see Georgia. You might see Texas. You might see Washington. And you might see Michigan as that 4. And then the other 2, of course, the wild cards in the whole thing might be Ohio State, might be Oregon, might be Alabama, all right, or maybe another team that I'm not even thinking about right now. I doubt it. But so it should be interesting. And with that, all right, I want to move over to the NFL. Rarely do I spend a lot of time with the NFL. But let me just see if I can put this in a nutshell. So like I said, the cartoon with the metrics, that's how they determine. They do analyze statistics. They do analyze injuries. They do analyze your strength of schedule. They do analyze, let's say, the first half versus the second half, where you're a better team maybe in the first or the second half. All those elements are evaluated by the committee when they make their six. But it is interesting, with the exception of Notre Dame, how often all of them are from a Power 5 conference. And that was the whole gist of the cartoon. But with the NFL, it's a little bit different because they've expanded the playoffs over the years. It must have been really tough to be an NFL player, as I'm just thinking about this right now. And I was going through a list of championships. There were times where teams, let's say, finished 11-3, or let's say they were 10-2, and they didn't even get to the playoffs because they finished second place behind a team that was, 11-1, let's just say. And there was only one playoff match. It was the West versus the East in the NFL. And it must have been pretty tough when those players now see how many teams make the playoffs and say, you know what? We could have, if we had gotten into the playoffs, if we had playoffs that were expanded that year, we might have done some damage in the playoffs. That being stated, there are a number of teams right now that do have a chance to make the playoffs. And with the AFC, I'm just going through it. And this is why the Jets are just so much fun. Because to me, they and the Pittsburgh Steelers have been the story in a kind of, I shouldn't say boring NFL season, but there hasn't been much excitement unless you've been watching or really watching with intensity the Jets and the Pittsburgh Steelers, because both teams, all the teams have flaws. There's no question about it. Very rarely, though, and I'm going to show you this, very rarely were the Super Bowl champions unflawed. Let's just say that. They had their weaknesses, and you're going to see how, but they still were able to win the trophy. But anyway, I think Miami, obviously 8-3. The real question for them is, will they win the division? In all likelihood, it does lead that way. I still like Buffalo. I said I like their chances. I know they have a tough road to hoe to get into the playoffs, but I think, and I've been using this cliche lately, but I do believe this, they probably righted their ship and they're going to get in. Put it this way, if you still think the Jets harbor some feelings that they can make the playoffs, why are you going to dismiss the Bills? So you have Miami, you have Buffalo. In the AFC North, boy, we used to call this the Central in a lot of ways. And with all the teams in there, with the exception of the Ravens, it's still the same. Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati. The only replacement, of course, is the Houston Oilers, now the Tennessee Titans. And now you have the Houston Texans in the same division as the Tennessee Titans. It's bizarre how the game has changed so much. But Baltimore, boy, they have been impressive. Scored 304 points so far. I know it's based on 11 games, but a huge differential in points between their offense and defense. They've only allowed 177 points. They have a huge differential of 127 points. Now, that's over 11 games. So you're talking about almost 12 points a game. Separate them. They're winning games 24-12. And I think I did a little thing last year that most games are settled as 7 or fewer points. So to do that, they have a solid team. I'm not saying they're a great team. They're a solid team. They're definitely probably they'll probably be able to stop any kind of challenge from the Browns or the Steelers. Now, the Steelers lost a tough game last week. Like I said about the Jets, with their whole quarterback controversy, they do have a good defense. It has been so tested, and I'll tell you, it must be very frustrating to be a Jet defensive player. Today I was watching the game, and they bottle up Miami, and then Miami goes on a 14 or 15 play drive that sucks away the whole third quarter. It was 9 minutes long, and you're saying to yourself, wow, we still have a chance, got to get the ball back. When they get the ball back, though, they can't move it. They're better off putting it on first down and trying to bottle them up and maybe force a turnover. That's how bad it's become. But they're still exciting because they're still only 4-7. They have a real outside shot, and I really want them to get there. I want to see what's going to happen if they are in a playoff spot. What's going to happen at the end of the year? Does Aaron Rodgers fulfill his promise, come back and lead the Jets to the playoffs? It's been a fascinating story, and I guess it's because we live in the bubble of the New York, New Jersey metro area, and the Jets have been more of a story than, of course, the Giants. And for the Giants, it's been a frustrating season. But the Jets have been a pretty interesting story for the NFL. The other story, of course, is the Steelers, because they're 6-4 with no basically passing. And I do like Pickens as a quarterback. I like him. They really kind of no running game. They are being outscored by their opponents, and yet they're 6-4. And everyone is hyping them as really a playoff team. And I think they can get there. And I think people have been rooting them for, because Tomlin's a class act as a coach. He's a great coach. And maybe with the fall of Belichick this year, or over the last couple of years, people are starting to realize what a great coach Tomlin is. I think last year, the fact that they finished the season the way that they did, over 500, so that Tomlin has never had an under 500 season in his entire career, said a lot about the Steelers, says a lot about their coach, says a lot about the respect the players have for the coach, and really does tell you about the coaching acumen that Tomlin brings to the game. He, of course, and I'm rooting for the Steelers. And I'm not a huge Steeler fan. Always kind of liked them, but never really was, I'm just flat out rooting for the Steelers. I'm not like that with the NFL anymore. I just kind of, grab on to a story and go from there. And I have said this before on past Park Ridge Sports History episodes, that the Steelers, growing up, I remember them as being one of the worst franchises in the game. But now, after Chuck Noll, Terry Bradshaw, Joe Green, the whole Steel Curtain, the whole thing, they've had more winning seasons than losing seasons in their franchise history. So they've gotten past, let's say, being this terrible franchise. That's been erased. And really what most people remember about the Steelers, they see them as, obviously, no pun intended, forging a new identity as winners. And really, they've had Noel, they've had Tomlin, really, 3 great coaches, all have won, all have been successful, all have been Super Bowl winners. So it's amazing. That's why I'm not giving up on the Steelers just yet. And like I said, they have been outscored by 29 points. So they're in every game. But theoretically, 500 record, you're losing games 19-16, kind of like last week's game of 13-10 to the Cleveland Browns. And that was a pretty exciting game. I know a lot of people don't like defense. It was just a gut-wrenching game. Tough, real blue-collar type game between 2 blue-collar cities, 2 blue-collar ball clubs as well. And it came down to a last-second field goal. It was a good game. I'm sorry, it was. Jacksonville, of course, 7-3. Houston, I know that a lot of people have gone on their bandwagon. I can't dismiss them. They're 6-4. And if I include the Jets, and I'm still holding out hope for them, you got to like the Colts at 5-5. Why not? And then Kansas City, I think, cemented themselves as still the team to beat. Despite losing to the Eagles, they are going to correct some of their flaws in their offense. I know they didn't score in the second half against the Eagles. Maybe the Eagles had something more to prove than the Chiefs did. But they're still a good team. They still got Mahomes. He's exciting. He's electrifying. He kind of reminds me, and I do. I heard somebody say, reminds you of, let's say, that touch, that two-hand touch football games that we used to play in the sandlots or on the Little League fields when we were kids. And that's how he plays. And I wish there was more players like that. And I wish that there were more coaches who weren't so, what I like to call them, corporate. I wish there are more coaches who are imaginative with the play calling. A little razzle dazzle. Have some fun that way, because that's how the AFL was built, with all the razzle dazzle, the high octane offense, the whole thing. I mean, if you read or watch the old videos of the AFL, they'll tell you they just wanted to make it offensive driven, make it exciting with some crazy plays, laterals, and all kinds of complex plays and all the rest of that put points on the board. And I see a little bit of Mahomes like that. He would have been perfect in the early 60s in the AFL. He would have been unbelievable as a player. I just love it. Now, in the NFC, you got Philadelphia, Cowboys. They have really cemented themselves as playoff contenders, and I would even say Super Bowl contenders. I know that the Cowboys have fallen short of that prize over the last few years, and the Eagles, of course, with a big win on Monday, coming back on the Chiefs and defeating them, not holding them scoreless in the second half. Not bad. So Eagles, Cowboys, the Lions, of course. I felt sorry for them in one respect, and then I got mad at them in another, because the Lions, I thought, had a chance to really show the nation on Thanksgiving Day what they were made of. And I don't know whether it was them playing so poorly or Green Bay saying, wow, we can get back in this playoff hunt ourselves, because now they've improved. They are right now 5-6. They looked pretty good defensively against high-octane Lion offense. I don't know whether the Lions had two tough bad breaks go against them. I know bad breaks are part of the game, all the rest of it, but had a couple of bad breaks go against them in the first half, and they couldn't ever get really back into it. But Green Bay played well, and they're 5-6. They got a chance for a wild card spot. And Detroit, if they're 8-3, who knows? They could collapse as well. So that's why that was such a huge game on Thursday between perennial rivals Green Bay and Detroit. And, of course, sandwiched between them is Minnesota, which started off the season poorly. I think they lost 4 of their first 5. Now they're 6-5. And they're without their quarterback, their starting quarterback, traded for Dobbs. So they're 6-5, and they're looking pretty good too. The Saints, probably in the worst division. I'm not throwing out that the Saints are going to win their division. In fact, I'm holding out hope that the Falcons can come out on top there. I don't know why. I just like the Falcons. They're 4-6. Saints are 5-5. It's certainly not over by any means, but there'll only be one team, I think, coming out of that division. And of course, in San Francisco and Seattle, Frisco won a big game on Thursday night. I didn't see any of the game. I was watching other stuff, and basically I was so stuffed I probably fell asleep with all that turkey and made a very good nap turn into a good night's sleep. But they did defeat Seattle, but still, Seattle's 6-5. Now, I named about 10 teams from each division. But what I'm going to do is this. I want to separate it and say this. I'm going to go to the list of Super Bowl history. Now, this is I was just doing an odds-on thing. And I was looking at some of the teams for, I don't know, I was looking for any kind of, if I was going to try to recognize a Super Bowl winner in those candidates, who might it be? Now, it's very easy, and I just did it before, to say Kansas City and Philadelphia will meet in the Super Bowl. They have 2 quality quarterbacks. They have quality offenses, quality defenses. Andy Reid, great head coach. Actually, they have 2 great coaches right now, even Philadelphia's. The link there between them, the Kelseys, and also the fact that Andy Reid did coach Philadelphia into a Super Bowl, the whole story. I think everyone is saying, they'll probably wind up playing again in the Super Bowl. But that may not be. And the reason why I say that is this. I was looking at the 51 winners. And, of course, this is very primitive, what I was doing. I just judged it on this. I was just looking for similarities. And what I found out was this. I just totaled all the teams that I went from 1 to 32, because now we have 32 teams in the league, 16 in each conference, 4 in each division. But it didn't always start that way. For instance, when Green Bay first won the NFL, there were 15 teams in the league. Then when they won the following year, they added the 16th. Then the Jets, who won in 1968 in the AFL, where there are only 10 teams in the AFL. So I did it on that judgment, by depending on how many teams were in the league. And that's how even my resource, Football Reference, did it as well. So now we have 32 teams, and I just judged it on this. I was looking at their position, the team's position in terms of scoring and in terms of defense, just like football did, just to see if there's any similarity. And what I did discover was this. I don't think it's anything brilliant, but I'm just trying to look for some things. I noticed that 11 of the 51 teams, 20%, were number one in scoring. But 25 of the 51 winners finished in the top 3 in scoring. Now, that includes either 32 teams or 1 out of 10, like in the AFL, or 1 out of 15 and 16. And then, of course, the AFL and the NFL merge, and it moves up really rapidly. Here's what I did find, though. Pittsburgh had the lowest scoring offense. They finished 20th in scoring the year that they defeated the Seattle Seahawks. No, not the Seahawks. They were 9th that year. Seattle, when they beat Arizona, finished 20th in scoring. They had 21.7. Right now, they're not even averaging 17 points. And that's my whole point. So even when they finished 20th, the lowest scoring offense in the history of the Super Bowl, in terms of where they finished in the division, that's Pittsburgh. They won a Super Bowl, the 2008-2009 Super Bowl. They defeated Arizona, but they were still scoring 21.7 points a game. But they finished 20th in the league. Okay? They are right now, I'm looking at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is, ready for this? Pittsburgh is averaging, 16.6 points a game. So they're 5 points below it. So you have to say, oof. And they're 29 points fewer. They're allowing 19.5 points a game. All right? Now, here's the deal. Where is the high-scoring teams? Miami, they just added. They were at 305. All right? Here's the interesting thing. Number one teams finished 11 times, won the Super Bowl. Miami, I was looking at this. The 72 and 73 teams of Miami, they were super defensively. People don't realize that. The 73 team finished first, allowed only 12.2 points per game. The 74 team, which lost twice, had a lower defensive points per game, 10.7. Both teams, of course, win Super Bowls. They lost twice in those 2 years. It's amazing. Miami, though, is the first team to do this. They're the first team to lead the league in scoring and lead the league in defense. They won by an average of 27.5 to 12.2. Better than 2 touchdowns way back in 1973. In 74, their defense got even better, still finished first, allowed 1.5 fewer points per game. Defense, the offense went down. They only finished 5th out of 26 teams, 24.5 points. Then I was looking, and the first team to finish with 30 points per season was the Washington Redskins with 30.3. They finished first. Never realized this, though, how good those Washington defenses were under Joe Gibbs. They only allowed 14 points that year when they scored 30. They were one of the highest differentials, 16.3. It doesn't beat the St. Louis Rams, which is amazing to me because everyone thinks of the St. Louis Rams as being the greatest offensive show on turf, or what was it? It was something like that. They did score 32.9 points per game. All right, which is I believe the all-time high, 32.9. They did finish first out of 31 teams that year. There were only 31 then, and they only allowed 15 points a game, and they finished fourth. So their defense, probably because of the offense, but that defense, I don't think ever got the recognition that they desired, but they still have the highest difference between points scored, points allowed of any Super Bowl winner. And that was with 31 teams in the league, 17.8, 2 touchdowns, and a field goal, basically, right? And when I say 2 touchdowns, I'm talking about the extra points as well. Now, the best defense, though, was the Baltimore Ravens, and I think everyone probably would have suspected that. They allowed only 10.3 points per game. This year's Ravens team is really doing the same thing. They finished first in the league. Right now, Baltimore has allowed 177 points in 11 games. Basically, they're averaging 11 points, about 12 points per game. The year that they won, 10.3. Still the best D. Now, for all you Giant fans out there, ready for this? The Giant team finished 9th. Well, let me just see what year that was. Obviously, it was the year that they beat the New England Patriots. I think it was the second time around that they beat them. I just want to make sure on this. I do believe it was this year. The Giants, ready for this? They finished 9th in scoring in 2011. 9-7 regular season under Tom Coughlin. They finished 9th. They scored 24 points a game, 24.6. They allowed 400 points. This is the only team that gave up more points than they scored, which kind of, for all you Pittsburgh fans out there, gives you some hope, right? Giants finished 25th out of 32 teams. They allowed 25 points per game and only scored 24.6, but not only won 9 out of 16 games during the regular seasons, but defeated in the playoffs the Atlanta Falcons, the Green Bay Packers, the San Francisco 49ers in overtime, and then the New England Patriots to finish the season, or with those 4 games, 13-7. That New England Patriot team, 13-3. Pretty amazing stat by Tom Coughlin to finish with more points allowed than points scored and win a Super Bowl. Gives hope, like I said, to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And just one more, because I'm going to make this a short version today. I'm feeling a little under the weather. There are only, here's the other thing, too, I noticed. 1, 2, 3, 4, and of course, this happens. There's only 5 teams that finish with 30 or more points who have won the Super Bowl. And of course, that all occurred after they made them it tougher on the defense and more beneficial to the offense in terms of scoring. 6 teams, scored over 30 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they were, ready for this, Washington, Denver, St. Louis, New Orleans. And New Orleans had a terrible defense that year. They finished 20 out of 32. Yet they still finished with a great differential, 10 points a game. Tampa Bay and San Francisco. But of the defenses, ready for this? If you're looking for help for defense, of the 51 winners, 25 have finished in the top 3. Interestingly enough, the Giants were the lowest defensive team to ever win a Super Bowl, ranked at 25th. New Orleans at 20. All right. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, the lowest offense ever to win a Super Bowl in terms of the league average. They were 20th when they defeated the Arizona Cardinals. Interesting. But there is, ready for this, 11 times the number 1 offense wins the Super Bowl. 15 times the number 1 defense wins the Super Bowl. 9 times the second best offense wins the Super Bowl, 6 times defense. 5 times for third best offense, 4 times for the third best defense, and then I'll do 4 and 5. 3 and 4. So 3 times the fourth best offense has won the Super Bowl, and 4 times the fifth best offense. You're still really in the top 15% there. And then it's amazing how close these are. 3 times the fourth best defense has won the Super Bowl, and twice the fifth best. If you take a look at some of the teams, and here they are, that have won the Super Bowls, you'll notice that many of them finished in the top 3 or 4 in points scored or points allowed. Excuse me. Anyway, we can delve into this more next week, but this is a start. There are the playoffs. These are some of the teams that I look and just match up your teams with where that compares all time on the Super Bowl. This is Will O'Toole. Thank you again. Shout out to Howard for Park Ridge Sports. See you next week with another episode. Bye now.